The last glow of the Wyoming sun melted across the plains, pouring a river of fire through the tall, whispering grass. A hawk circled high overhead, riding a column of heat that shimmered up from the ground. Down below, a single rider watched the light fade with the calm patience of a man who had long ago learned that the land answered to no one. Luke Hartwell rested his hands on the fence rail that bordered the south pasture of his ranch, the Bar H, and squinted toward the trail that ran from town. He had spent the day mending a broken corral post and checking water lines for his cattle. His back ached pleasantly from the honest labor, and the faint tang of sweat and leather hung around him. When the dusk began to rise far off on the road, he frowned. Few people came out this way without reason. A cloud of grit rolled closer, and before long he saw the shape of a stagecoach, its wheels waddling and creaking, pulled by two chestnut horses lathered in foam. It was late for a delivery, too far past sundown for any decent traveler to still be moving. Luke leaned his forearm on the rail and waited, the wind tugging gently at his shirt. The coach slowed as it reached the ranch gate. The driver, a wiry man in a brown hat, raised one hand in greeting. "Even in, Mr. Hartwell," he called. "Got myself a passenger skin for ya." Luke's brown head. "A passenger? You sure you got the right branch?" "Sure as sunrise," the driver said. He reined in the horses and jumped down, dusting his sleeves. "Name's Hartwell, clear as day. Says she needs to see you personal." "She?" Luke echoed. The coach door creaked open. A small, slender hand appeared first, clutching the side for balance. Then the woman stepped down. Her dress, once a soft blue, was streaked with road dust. Her boots were scuffed nearly through the sole. A bonnet shaded her face, but when she lifted her chin, Luke saw eyes the color of wet green moss, bright, frightened, and fierce all at once. The driver tipped his hat. "Miss Bennett, here's Mr. Hartwell like you asked." Luke felt his heartbeat slow and harden. "Miss Bennett," he repeated carefully. "You're a long way from anywhere. What's your business with me?" The woman looked back at the driver, as if afraid he might vanish. "Thank you," she murmured, pressing a few coins into his hand. "Please don't wait. You've done enough." The driver hesitated. "You sure you're all right, miss?" "I'll be fine." Luke's eyes narrowed. Something in her trembling voice didn't sound fine at all. The coachman shrugged and climbed back up. "Even into you, Mr. Hartwell." The whip cracked. The horses surged forward, and within moments the coach had rolled away, swallowed by the lengthening shadows. Now there was only the woman and Luke. She stood straight but her hands were shaking. "Mr. Hartwell," she began, "I know this must seem strange, but I had nowhere else to go." Luke studied her for a long beat, taking in the dirt on her hem, the bruise on one wrist, the tired determination in her eyes. "You're right," he said finally. "It does seem strange." Her breath hitched, but she pressed on. "My name is Clara Bennett. I'm from Sweetwater Creek, 2 days east of here. My father he passed this spring, left debts behind that we couldn't pay. The bank took our farm, and a broken bar." Her voice faltered. "The man who held the mortgage said he'd forgive it if I agreed to marry him." Luke's mouth tightened. He'd heard too many stories like that, a man using coin and threat to trap women with no one left to protect them. "You didn't agree?" She shook her head, strands of hair falling loose from her bonnet. "I ran. He swore he'd find me, and I believe him. Folks in town said you were an honest man, said you didn't turn away those in need." Luke shifted uncomfortably. "That may be, but I don't make it a habit of talking in strangers, especially ones run in from the law or from men who might follow." Clara's fingers twisted the strap of her satchel. "I'm not asking for much, sir. Only a place to work. I learn my keep. But if you send me away tonight, I've got nowhere to go. I'll die out there." She lifted her gaze, raw desperation cutting through her words. "If you don't marry me, I won't be able to live." The sentence dropped between them like a stone into deep water. The wind fell silent. Luke stared at her. "Marry you?" he said slowly, disbelief roughening his voice. "Miss Bennett, I don't even know you." "I know it's madness," she whispered, stepping closer. "But a woman alone in these parts of people talk. Men take what they want. If you'd just let folks believe I belong here, they'd leave me be." Her eyes glistened, reflecting the last light of day. There was no guile there, No pretense, only fear and the faint spark of courage holding her together. Luke rubbed the back of his neck. You realize what you're risking? A rancher's life ain't gentle. This house ain't full of servants or comforts, and a name on paper won't protect you if trouble's close behind. I don't need comfort, she said. I need a chance to start again. He exhaled slowly. A lone coyote howled far off in the hills. He remembered another woman, Eliza Gray, from years ago, the one who'd left him for a banker in Cheyenne. Since then, he'd kept his heart buried under work and silence. But this woman, this Clara, wasn't like Eliza. She wasn't here for wealth or land. She was running from the kind of darkness that left no room for pride. Finally, Luke nodded once. You can stay, he said. For now. I won't promise marriage, but I won't turn you out, either. We'll sort what's what in the morning. Clara sagged with relief, pressing a hand to her chest. Thank you, Mr. Hartwell. Luke, he corrected quietly. If you're staying here, you can call me Luke. He turned toward the porch. The boards creaked beneath his boots, and he pushed open the heavy oak door. Warm light spilled out, a glow from the hearth, the smell of stew still hanging in the air. Come inside. You look half frozen. She hesitated, then followed. The inside of the house was simple but clean. A rifle rested above the mantel, and shelves lined with worn books stood beside the hearth. Luke ladled out a bowl of stew and set it before her at the table. Eat, he said. You can tell me the rest once you've had something warm in you. Clara obeyed, her hands trembling as she lifted the spoon. She ate slowly, as though savoring each bite after too many hungry nights. When she was done, she wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and murmured, I can't repay your kindness enough. I'll find work for you come daylight. Luke replied. We'll figure something fair. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the pop of the fire. Clara glanced around the room. A framed photograph hung on the wall of Luke standing beside two older folks. Your family? She asked softly. My parents, he said. Gone a long time now. I'm sorry. He nodded. Death don't wait for a man to be ready. Clara's eyes softened. No, it isn't. Outside, wind brushed the windows like whispering fingers. Somewhere in the distance, a horse snorted. Luke's instincts pricked. He'd spent too many nights guarding his herd not to notice when something changed. He went to the window and looked out. Nothing moved except the shadows. Still, unease crept down his spine. You best get some rest, he said. You can take the spare room down the hall. Thank you, she whispered. She rose, clutching her satchel, and hesitated at the doorway. Luke, broken bar if the man I ran from does come here. He won't reach you here, Luke interrupted, his voice low but steady. Not while you're under my roof. For the first time, she smiled, small and fleeting, like dawn breaking over the plains. Good night, Luke. Good night, Clara. When her footsteps faded, Luke stood staring into the fire, his jaw tight. He didn't know what kind of trouble was riding his way, but something told him it wasn't far behind that stagecoach. He reached for the rifle on the mantel, checked the chamber, and set it within arm's reach before banking the fire low. Then he stepped out onto the porch. The night was cold and vast, the stars sharp as nails against the black. He leaned on the railing, listening to the crickets and the restless rustle of grass. A new life had walked into his home tonight, uninvited, unpredictable, and heartbreakingly fragile. And though he told himself it was only for the night, a part of him already knew that nothing about this woman or this evening would fade so easily. Come morning, the first light of dawn crept over the plains, pale and gold, touching the ridge of the Tetons with fire. A thin fog hovered above the pastures, curling through the grass like ghost smoke. Inside the Bar H ranch house, Luke Hartwell was already awake. He had always risen before the Sioux habit carved by years of cattle and silence. But this morning, as he pulled on his boots and stepped into the cool air, something felt different. There was another heartbeat beneath his roof. He crossed the yard toward the barn, the chill biting his skin. The horses shifted and snorted softly inside, welcoming him with familiar sounds. He opened the stall for his gray gelding, Whisper, and ran a hand down the animal's flank. Easy, boy, he murmured. The horse nickered low, nudging Luke's shoulder. Outside, a meadowlark sang its bright, fearless tune. Then he heard the soft creak of the porch boards. Turning, he saw Clara standing in the doorway, wrapped in a faded shawl. Her hair was unbound, falling in loose curls about her shoulders, catching the sunrise like bronze threads. She looked smaller in the light, more fragile somehow, but her eyes were steady. "You're up early," Luke called. "I couldn't sleep much." Her voice carried a tremor, though whether from the cold or her thoughts he couldn't tell. "I thought maybe I could help." Luke nodded toward the pump beside the barn. "Fetch some water and we'll start breakfast. There's coffee inside, beans in the pot." She moved with quiet grace, though it was clear she wasn't used to ranch work. The first pull on the pump handle nearly threw her off balance, and cold water splashed across her hands. She laughed softly, the sound surprising them both. It was a shy, uncertain laugh, like the first notes of music after a long silence. Luke found himself smiling, a rare thing. "Keep at it, you'll get the hang soon enough." She carried the bucket inside, and soon the scent of frying bacon drifted through the air. Luke joined her, pouring 2 mugs of coffee. They ate in companionable quiet, the clink of utensils mingling with the morning breeze that whispered through the open window. When she finished, Clara brushed crumbs from her lap. "I meant what I said last night, Luke. I learned my stay." "Tell me what needs doing." He studied her a moment. "You ever handle horses?" "I've fed them," she said, hesitating, "but never saddled one." "Well, there's a first time for everything." He stood, motioning her to follow. Outside, the sky had turned pure blue. The land stretched forever in rolling hills, scattered cottonwoods, and the shimmer of heat beginning to rise. Luke led her to the corral. "This here's Dusty," he said, patting the neck of a chestnut mare. "Gentle as they come. You treat her kind, she'll return it." Clara reached out a tentative hand. The horse snorted and lowered her head, accepting the touch. A smile curved Clara's lips. "She's beautiful." Luke nodded. "Most good things are, if you take time to notice." For the next hour, he showed her how to curry the horse, tighten the cinch, and tie a proper knot. She listened carefully, her brow furrowed in concentration. Her hands were small but quick, and before long she'd mastered the basics. Sweat glistened on her temples, and a faint color bloomed in her cheeks. Luke found his gaze lingering longer than he intended. "Good," he said gruffly. "You learn fast." "My father always said work keeps the mind steady," she replied. Luke's expression softened. "What did he do?" "Farmer," she said quietly. "Corn, mostly." "He used to sing while he plowed," said the land listens if you treat it like an old friend. "After he died, the farm just a broken bar stopped answering." He wanted to say something and offer comfort, maybe, but words had never been his gift. So instead he said, "Land's like people. It needs time to heal." And that seemed to be enough. She nodded, eyes glistening. By midday, the heat settled heavy over the plains. Luke hitched the wagon to Whisper and loaded feed for the north pasture. Clara climbed beside him, brushing dust from her skirt. The trail stretched wide and empty, the sky enormous above them. "You ever think the world's too big for one person to carry?" she asked suddenly. "Every day," Luke said. "But it's the only one we've got." She smiled faintly. The wind caught her hair, lifting it like silk. For a heartbeat, Luke forgot the hard years behind him, the betrayals, the loneliness. The quiet nights where the only voices were coyotes and wind. He saw only her, this brave, frightened woman who had come out of nowhere and somehow fit beside him as though she'd always belonged. They reached the pasture, where a small herd of cattle grazed along a creek. Luke climbed down to fix a loose rail on the fence. Clara helped, holding the board steady as he hammered. When the last nail went in, he noticed her hands had blistered and red, but she didn't complain. "You don't quit easy," he said. "I can't afford to," she answered simply. The honesty of it caught him off guard. There was no self-pity in her tone, only quiet resolve. Luke realized he respected that more than anything. They rode back toward the ranch in the low light of afternoon. Clouds gathered on the horizon, thick, gray, and rolling fast, the air tested of rain. By the time they reached the barn, thunder was grumbling in the distance. "Storm's coming," Luke said. "Best get the horses in." Together they moved quickly, securing the gates, throwing down extra hay. Lightning split the sky as the first drops began to fall. They dashed for the porch, soaked through by the time they reached it. Clara laughed breathlessly, pushing wet hair from her face. Luke, watching her, felt something in his chest loosen, a warmth he hadn't felt in years. Inside, They lit lamps and toweled off. Rain drummed against the roof like 1,000 small hooves. Clara stood by the window, staring out at the storm. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "Depends who you ask," Luke replied. "Storms have taken a lot from folks out here." She turned, eyes shining in the lamplight, but they also washed the dust away. For a moment neither spoke. The fire crackled, and the sound of rain wrapped the house in its steady rhythm. Then Clara's voice dropped, fragile as glass. "Luke, a broken bar if he come as the man I ran from, you will tell me, won't you? You won't let him trick me into leaving?" He met her gaze. "I gave you my word, didn't I?" "Yes," she whispered. "And I believe you." Something inside him shifted. Again an ache and a promise all tangled together. He wanted to tell her she was safe, that no one would ever hurt her again. But promises in the West were dangerous things. They had to be earned, not spoken. So he said only, "Get some rest when the storm passes. We've got fences to mend come morning." She smiled faintly. "Good night, Luke." "Good night, Clara." After she'd gone to her room, Luke poured himself a measure of whiskey and stared into the fire. Outside, lightning flashed white against the dark hills. He thought about the man hunting her. He thought about how fear had lived in her eyes even as she smiled. He didn't know what kind of devil she'd escaped, but he knew one thing for certain. If that man came to his door, he'd meet a wall of iron. Luke set the empty glass down and went to check the rifle leaning by the door. The storm howled on, fierce and unrelenting, but inside the barrage there was light, steady, quiet, and new.